Okay. Tina taught me a new word called anxiety, when you're anxious and excited. So thank you for that, Tina. I'm feeling very anxiety, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you for waking up early for whatever I'm about to say, which is life is short. Let's make some beautiful, inspiring, exquisite, deep, emotionally feeling work while we can. Okay. I want to start with some backgrounds. This is my mom, Julie, and my dad, Sydney. My mom's a retired public school teacher. My dad is an artist, and growing up, my parents were really hippies. And when you have hippie parents, you don't have things like video games or junk food or TV. And so in addition to being the only Jewish kid in school, I was also a real cultural alien. And so that kind of inspired a lifelong fascination with human connection. But back to my dad. This is him. I don't even know if I need to say anything about this. I don't. I'm just going to go to the next slide. No, he's a compulsive creator, a real artist's artist. And so growing up, creativity was valued in our household above all else. It was really our religion, was creativity, which, sounds pretty nice, right? It's like everyone wants parents like that. And my dad's work is beautiful. This is some of his glass sculpture work. But having an artist parent is also really challenging because some years his work would sell, and then other years he would totally change his body of work and it wouldn't sell, at all, for many, many years on end. And so growing up, I made myself a promise. It was just, being an artist was too unstable. I didn't want any part of it. And yet here I am today in front of you at Creative Mornings, so I failed. And I'm wondering, for the designers, artists, creative directors, entrepreneurs, et cetera, in the house, have you ever just had this creative urge where you just have to go out and make something, even if it's impractical? You just are like, fuck it, I've got to go do this thing. That's kind of been my blessing and curse as well. And so I want to share 4 quick projects just to give you background on my response to that. Are there any handwritten letter fans in the house, by a show of hands? This is such an amazing audience. I gave a keynote at an undisclosed place yesterday, and there was 3 hands in the snail mail my email. Is a collaborative art project that transforms emails into handwritten letters. And I ended up recruiting 2,000 volunteers to send out 30,000 letters around the world. This was a free service, turned into a book. It's a great stocking stuffer for the holidays. And this project taught me the value of human connection in our increasingly digital world. During the Occupy protests, Buddy and I created these custom infographics about the wealth disparity in America that stamped on dollar bills, which is a medium that naturally circulates. And we were really excited to kind of get this out into the world at the time. And this project taught me the value of how really everything can be a medium. Okay, so this month's theme is vision, and so I thought I had to throw this in here. This is IRL glasses. When you put them on, they block screens. And this was a Kickstarter project that a buddy and I made. We sold 2,000 pairs in a month, and they are now collected at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, along with Snap spectacles and Google Glass. And I invite you to consider the budget that we had versus the budget that those 2 respective companies had. And I'm really interested in technology and humanity and the fact that most of us are just walking around looking down at a screen 99% of the time, myself included. And so I started asking strangers on the street, what's the last photo on your phone, and the backstory. And it's an amazing icebreaker. I invite you, if you're meeting someone for the first time, just ask that question. It's great. Even if it's a mundane, boring photo, it still gives you an interesting lens into who they are. So this is a project I did that made its rounds around the internet. And this is just me trying to impress you, to be honest. These are different independent projects I've done through the years and the press coverage they've received. And I also share it because I'm interested not just in like creating the thing, but then like what happens to the thing and like how do people respond to it and what are the ripple effects, so it's really exciting. And media agnostic is a principle of my studio and my work where we start with the concept and let that inform what the execution is. And so all this work is great, really fulfilling on the creative side, but not as much fulfilling or resourced on the commerce side. It's all independent projects, unpaid. And so I ended up getting a job in advertising working at Wyden Kennedy Amsterdam. It's an amazing independent agency, and I got hired based solely on my art project, so I was like really excited. I lasted 5 months, and for me, working at an ad agency meant doing a lot of presentations, but not making anything, and I just needed to make. So before going back to the United States, because my visa ended, I was so appreciative of art and culture in the Netherlands, because they spend $3 billion per year on art and culture, which is amazing. That ends up being over $200 per capita. I was going to invite you to guess what the American expenditure is, but I'm not going to ask you to guess. I'm just going to tell you. We spend $6.83 per capita on art and culture, so that's roughly 1/30th per person. And so coming back to the States from Amsterdam, I was like, okay, my dad's an artist, I saw how that went, and then like looking at this kind of budgetary discrepancy, I need to figure out like, how do I make it? How do you make it, you guys? It's a daunting question. And so I became interested in, is it possible to like figure out the margins and like find this little Venn diagram sweet spot between art and commerce where like art is resourced and commercial work can be like human and like actually inspiring? I don't know the answer to this, but I'm in pursuit of it. And the thesis of this inspired Cash Studios, which is my studio. This logo was designed by Zipeng Zhu, who could not be here, but I want to shout him out. And yeah, we do campaigns, films, experiences, and products for some of the biggest brands in the world. I would say most of our work is non-traditional and leans towards like celebrating human connection. But it's impossible to create in a vacuum, and in running a studio, we have to be cognizant of the larger creative landscape, right? And so I was really inspired by Liz Tran's talk last month at Creative Mornings, and so I'm totally copying this. I'm gonna ask everyone, I know it's early, would you mind standing up for a quick interactive exercise? It's kind of a cool sound. Okay, I'm gonna read a couple prompts, and I'm gonna invite you to stay standing if you agree with the prompt. If you disagree, you can sit down. You can stand down. Stand down. So stay standing if you agree with the statement, I am overwhelmed by the amount of content available. So we've got 4 million hours of video content being created every day. I feel like everyone here has a friend that started a podcast last week that wants you to listen. And you should listen, for that matter. Stay standing if you agree with, I'm concerned that my experience is being filtered through an algorithm. More and more of what we experience is dictated by lines of code. Stay standing if you agree with, I have big questions around how AI will impact the future of creative work. I have many thoughts about AI. Now is not the time for them, but I do wonder if creative work is how we express our humanity, how does AI fit into that? I'm inundated with more data than I know what to do with. Analytics, data, metrics, all helpful, and it's so much. And then finally, my attention span is getting shorter and shorter. In 2004, the average attention span was 2.5 minutes. Today, it's 47 seconds, which means you've already forgotten what this talk is about. Okay, you can all gracefully sit down. Thank you. It was a cooler sound when you stood up. So for these reasons and more, I would argue that creativity as we know it is under siege. Maybe it sounds dramatic, but it feels really true in my heart. And it's definitely a way, way crazier landscape than when my dad was my age. So the rest of this talk is, what the hell can we do about it? And I don't feel like an expert. I feel like someone who's like in the pursuit of figuring this out in real time with people like you. So maybe some of this resonates. If it doesn't, ignore it. But yeah, for the remainder of the talk, I will humbly attempt to make it clear how we can find opportunities, big or small, to create great art, because that's what we all want. at the end of the day, I think. Okay, I'm excited to get into the case studies. Sea Lion Cow. Last summer, I was doing a really big commercial project, the biggest of my career, and for our studio. It was a 5-day shoot, really big client, really big budget, huge crew, and it ran me into the ground. It was like the most intense work project you've ever dealt with. It was that for me. I was definitely coming back to the apartment, crying to my wife, and was just like, I'm just so burdened and in over my head. And finally, at the end of the project, we were successful, but it was just like everyone on my team was running on fumes. It was really intense. I'm sure you can all imagine a work project like that. And so on Friday, when we went into overtime, I found out that all of the fancy gear, a really nice camera, some amazing lenses, were just gonna sit in a box truck for the whole weekend because we missed our deadline. And that didn't sit well with me. And so I very gently asked a couple crew members, I just kind of like planted a seed, like, would you want to like maybe do a little passion project this weekend with the gear? And they were like, one by one, they were like, yeah, I guess I could get into that. Okay, like, what are you thinking? And I was like, I don't know yet, but like, I'm just like feeling it out. And then I asked my wife, and this was the text message that she sent to me. She was my fiance at the time, and thank God she still married me. And she was not wrong. It was deranged, but she did give her blessing. And from there, I called on one of the most talented musicians I know and the most irresponsible person I know, my good friend Gideon. And I said, hey, I have this idea. I want to make a music video tomorrow. Are you in? And he was like, do you know what it's about? And I was like, no. And he's like, yeah, I'm in. Gideon's in the audience here tonight. Shout out Gideon. And so we picked one of his songs, Sea Lion Cow, and in 24 hours, we're shooting a film on the G train from midnight to 4 a.m. We had the idea of doing one take, and so we ended up getting one usable take from our entire time filming, and we were actually lucky to do that. This isn't in the script, but even at the beginning of the shoot, our box truck hit another car, and so it was just like, it was a lot, but we got there. So the film isn't out yet, for reasons I'll later explain, but I want to just give you like a little bit of a peek behind the scenes of what this film is like. So can we dim the lights? Yeah, amazing, thank you. So we start with Gideon in the subway. He's singing this song. He's holding this houseplant. And like, to be honest, it's pretty boring. The first 2 minutes are him just singing in the subway. That's it. There's like no narrative plot. You know, some people on the subway seem to like it, some not as much. And so I now want to give a teaser into like 30 seconds of the film when something kind of amazing happens. Here we go. Can we dim the lights?
Oh, my baby, don't cry, don't cry.
Thank you. This film ignored all of the best practices of how you're supposed to make film today and now, like today's age. It broke the rules for engagement. It broke the best practices for an algorithm. It didn't rely on any data. It certainly didn't play into people's short attention spans. Literally the first 2 minutes are just like Gideon singing on the subway with no narrative action happening whatsoever. Our plan was to release the film online and just kind of see what happened. And then my cousin Josh watched it and was like, oh, you should submit this to a festival. You should submit it to Tribeca. And lo and behold, we did. And our little film with no budget that was made in 24 hours and had just one usable take got to play on one of the most prestigious stages in the world. It was pretty cool. right? Yeah, super surreal. We definitely were not going after that. The film is not yet released because we're currently talking to potential media partners about distribution, which is really exciting. But I guess my takeaway here is like, we definitely didn't make this for a feed. And I fear that if we did, it wouldn't have been as kind of magical and serendipitous as it was. So the lesson and the takeaway here is to just think outside the algorithm and not try to just make work for the feed as compelling as that urge can be. And am I deranged, as my wife accused me of being? Probably. But I would argue that to make great art, you kind of have to pull that card sometimes and just like go out on a limb, and even if you haven't had sleep, just like do the damn thing. So. Hear that, Carla? Okay. Substack reached out to our studio to conceptualize and produce their largest storytelling partnership to date, which was a real honor. This was the assignment, and it was a really tight timeline, and so it seemed like a great opportunity to introduce them to this new business model that our studio has been prototyping called the trust model. What does this mean? So a typical client project will have 3 rounds at every phase, so they can be really involved and make sure that they're on board all the way through. With the trust model, you get 0 rounds of feedback. But we always align up front, so they kind of know what they're getting in theory, and then they just let us go for it. And you might be wondering, like, why would a client ever do that? This doesn't make any sense. What's the motivation? 2 really good reasons. 1, it cuts the timeline in half. Because there's no rounds of revisions, we know what we're doing, we can just kind of get there. And secondly, it costs half the price, more or less, because we're not dealing with rounds and rounds of feedback, we can just kind of do our thing. And it's definitely a big risk, it's not right for everyone, but Substack was into it. So we got to spend 3 to 4 weeks in a studio in Midtown Manhattan. Shout out to Khalil and Julie in the audience for their help, and anyone else that's here. It was a lot of fun just to prototype and to experiment. Big fan of those things. Rick Rubin has a quote, "I never decide if an idea is good or bad until I try it." And so we landed, this is Allison Roman. Can we dim the lights a little bit for this? And it's a really simple, that's great, thank you. Black and white, sophisticated, and we loved how this really showcased the creator's humanity. We wanted it to really be reflective of who they were. And so we developed 4 original formats. Each were 30 seconds to 3 minutes in length. There was haiku in 60 seconds. And so you'd reach your hand into this fishbowl, grab a haiku, and be on your way. There was lip service, which highlights Substackers reading their favorite writing with this uniquely intimate crop. And I think this is a really good example of like, if there were clients involved after 3 rounds, they'd probably be like, yeah, can we like not have a close-up of people's mouth? But I love it. I'm so into it. And then we have rapid fire. Shout out to Ankit if you're in the house. And I'm going to play you one video of creators responding to the prompt, "What's your favorite word?" So I'm going to play the video now, if we can dim the lights.
Schmaltz.
Fantastic.
Libidinal. Glory.
Flabbergasted.
Whimsical.
Yes.
Oldster.
Strawberry. Bananas. Ooh la la. That's not a word.
Obligatory.
Judiciously.
Cigar.
Nuance.
Yapping.
Dog.
Shimmer.
Oh, inchoate.
Interpolate.
Crepuscular.
Verbose.
Fuck.
So these were a lot of fun and a lot of work. We made 280 films, which is more films than I've ever made on a project. And as the members of my team will tell you, it was a very exciting and humbling endeavor to make that many films and QC every single one. But we were really happy with how they came out, as was Substack. And I wanted to read a quote by our client, Mills. He says, "The best work arises when talented people are given creative freedom for reasons ranging from the trivial Teams spend more energy on their own vision to the profound. The through line is fragile and best preserved by limiting the number of forces shaping it. It's so good. That's our client. And so the lesson here is that creative freedom is greater than creative by committee. Committees kill creativity, you guys. Committees kill creativity. Hold on. I want you to actually say it with me. Committees kill creativity. Thank you. Yeah, I totally respect the impulse to appease everyone, but consensus-based decision-making is not always right for championing a bold idea. So, okay, last project I want to share with you is for the San Francisco Museum of Modern Arts. And they approached my studio 3 months ago during the busiest stretch that we'd ever had. We were doing 4 concurrent projects. We had a call with them. They wanted us to, or they were looking for someone to promote their upcoming sports-themed exhibition with an ownable video campaign. This was their biggest exhibition to date, so it was like a really big deal. And we were trying to figure out, like, can we make this happen? The timeline, I don't know. And as we were kind of considering that, I had this spark of inspiration at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday as I was in bed, going to bed, had just turned out the light, lying down. I've got it. And like any good deranged person, I got out of bed and spent 4 hours writing a treatment called Night at the Museum. The idea of this elite basketball player dribbling through the museum at night, interacting with the architecture, with the art, and worked with my team to create a 40-page pitch deck, really like went for it. And in spite of the fact that it was a long shot, for reasons that I mentioned, like we knew we probably weren't gonna do it, but we still just wanted to like give it our all. And what do you know, SF MoMA wrote back and said, let's go for it. And so we immediately got to work bringing the treatment into life. And are there any Paige Beckers fans in the house? Couple. So in like a year from now, more than half of you will be like, yeah, Paige. She's going to be the #1 draft pick of the WNBA, amazing basketball player. And we got her to be in our film. So without further ado, I'm going to play the SF MoMA film, and then I'll talk about it a little bit. Thank you. Super proud of that one. Shout out to Khalil in the audience for all of your help throughout that project. Yeah, SF MoMA was thrilled. Our team was really happy with this. But as you might imagine, it wasn't without challenges in working with an institution that has over 1 million visitors per year, countless departments, 5 curatorial teams, a board of trustees, and a concept where you're dribbling a basketball. And the entire premise of the museum is to hold very valuable artwork that, like, there are departments whose job it was to just make sure that the art wasn't in any way compromised, and even if there was a 0.001% chance of that art being compromised or broken, that was like a red flag. So even after it was approved by our kind of like marketing team that we were working with at SF MoMA, there were all these other departments that were like, wait, what are you doing? And so I want to share a couple of examples of stakeholder feedback because I think it's like helpful to pull back the curtain and just explain, like, even though the end product was like exciting, it definitely is like a journey to get there. So these are all examples of stakeholder feedback. What if we film during the day instead of at night, right? That'd be a lot easier. Can we add a second basketball player? Can we half the crew size? Can we add a disclaimer to make it clear that visitors are not allowed to touch any of the art? Can we add a behind the scenes interview? How can we make the dream metaphor more literal? Can we explore an alt version of the film without any dribbling? That was the last business day before the shoot. Can we explore an alt version of the film without any art? And like, here's the thing, if you're doing collaborations with big organizations like this is normal. And it was definitely, I think my whole team and I learned, we were like humbled by this, but it's totally, that's what stakeholders do. They have concerns, they have to ask their questions. And so more and more I've kind of realized that as a creative studio, our job is to navigate that and to figure out how do we acquiesce to some of the feedback and how do we really push back. And so in this case, we were like, no, we can't film during the day, even though that'd be like way easier logistically for you guys. The whole concept is night at the museum. If we have sunlight shining through, it's like not gonna work. But we were like very happy to find 10 to 15 minutes in the middle of the shoot for them to get a BTS interview with Paige. That made a lot of sense to us. So yeah, really happy and proud of this idea. And I guess the takeaway is just you gotta really go big. Because we didn't know if we were gonna get the project or not, but we wanted to make it happen, and that navigating feedback is really an art in and of itself. So the lesson here is take ridiculously big swings because you never are gonna strike a nerve by playing it safe, and you never know what's gonna happen. Okay, getting towards the end, you guys. So sad. How can we go from trapped by the algorithm to think outside the algorithm? Creative by committee to creative freedom. And finally, fear of taking risks to take ridiculously big swings. And speaking of this, ridiculously big swings, here, can we dim the lights a little bit for this still? This is a photo of, or it's a still image of my dad, that's great, thank you, from a feature documentary that we're working on about him called The Ever Curious Man. And it's exploring the staggering beauty and sobering cost of being an artist. And I wanted to show this because he's so creative, always pushing the envelope, that even discarding old work has become its own creative project for him. And he's at the tender age of 83, continuing to make art at a furious pace. And spending time with him through this filmmaking process, I'm acutely aware that life doesn't last forever. In fact, it goes by pretty fast. But making creative work fuels his passion, keeps him vital, and gives him meaning. And I would argue that that's what we all want. I think we're all trying to make something that matters, that has meaning, that strikes a chord in someone, that resonates. And so I hope with this talk, it leaves you with the idea of however big the opportunity is or small, just try to figure out how can you make great art, because life is short. And I hope that you make beautiful things with it. So the world needs it. Thank you.